our last presenter is Delhi Saga, who is a PhD scholar, and his area of interest is software modeling and ethics in information systems.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sagar, doing 4th year of my PhD under guidance of Rishikesh Mohanty sir. Transparency computation for work groups. Work groups, I mean, it can be any group of people like coming together to do a specific task. It can be any group. It's like some students gathering to do some software project, or any group of people trying to do some specific task. So for my work, I chose like self-help groups to be representing these work groups. As we know, and maybe you do not know, it's like self-help groups are some 36 lakhs of groups are there in India. So this work relates to self-help groups, but not only that, it can relate to any kind of group doing some job or some project. Transparency, measuring transparency is not a simple thing because it's very abstract word. It's not like bandwidth. We can just put some device and measure the bandwidth. So computing transparency could be a very challenging thing also for a country like India, where corruption is too much and transparency is very less. I think the root cause of this too much corruption is lack of transparency. So I think my work relates more to India, and I think everywhere, any work group kind of environment. So Lord Kelvin, he says like, to measure is to know. If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. So unless there is a method to compute transparency, there is no way we can improve it. Someone went further than that, and they said like, you can't manage what you don't measure. So this is an attempt to measure transparency. As I said, work group could be anything depending on the environment. But as per self-help groups, I mean SHG, this is the structure. It's like members, a group of people, members, they form into a SHG, and SHG, those people, all SHGs come together to form into a federation, and on the top of federation will be a funding agency. So it's like funding agency could be government body, and they have very high objectives. It's like we want to improve agriculture in India, or it's like even bigger things like increase food production, something. when they have so big objective, they just can't do it by themselves. So they would make into projects and they give to federations. These federation people, they break them into even smaller projects and give to SHGs. And SHGs, they break them into individual tasks. So I think it follows the same method as in software projects we do. Each one making modules and all. I chose SHG because SHGs were not modeled till now. No one has modeled them. After I modeled and gave them to a government agency called Indian Statistics, they were very happy and they gave me a check also. They are so happy. So I chose SHGs for my study. This is structure of work group, how one is above another, how one is superior to another. So what is a task? This is a simple model of a task. It's like every task has some start state and a goal state. So as the task keep progressing, this smaller T1, these ones, they are like subtasks. A bigger task is split into smaller subtasks, and as we keep executing the smaller subtasks, it keeps moving towards a goal. And finally, when we are done with the last one, you don't represent. When we are done with the last subtask, it reaches the final state. And the D1, D2, D3, they are required for some other purpose. I mean, instead of mentioning a task with subtasks, I found it is better to represent tasks in terms of distances, because that it makes more sense to represent subtasks. It makes more sense to represent in terms of distances rather than subtasks, because a task can have 10 subtasks, out of which 9 of them are very easy, can be done in one day, each one day. So it's like 9 of the subtasks we just finish in 9 days. But the 10th subtask could be a longer one, a long-lived thing, and it could take 1 week. And if you are telling like in the task, 9 of the subtasks has finished and only 1 left, it gives us a wrong sense that it's almost done. Whereas 1 is remaining, 1 is pending, and it lasts for 1 week. So mentioning them in terms of distances, so when one subtask is finished, it moves a distance. That way, we'll have an idea how far the task has moved and how far it is still farther away from it. This is a member behavior model, how the member behaves, what happens at each member. It's not like only member, the same thing happens at the SHG level or federation level. So basically our idea is like transparency, we just provide through transparency messages. So here in this, that module is for task execution. So transparency messages will be generated from that module. We'll only see these perspectives, degrees, dimensions, and directions of transparency. When we measure all these things of transparency, we can to some extent be confident that we have measured transparency. It could be relative. It's like transparency for some other organization could mean something different, but as far as SHGs, this should be enough. And most of the work group environment which we are studying, I think this should be enough. So what is transparency? It is a free flow of information within an organization and between the organization and its many stakeholders. So it's like being able to see through what is happening. Because as we do not know what is happening, it's like in India, some people are making like 1,000 crores scam. We read in newspapers, 1,000 rupees scam. So it's because we are not able to see what is happening. They're just doing everything under the mask and they're able to accumulate 1,000 crores. That's too much money. So transparency is like we are able to see all of their work, how they are doing, what is happening and all. As per this SHG environment, these are the people that need transparency, and these are the people that are concerned with. Perspectives in transparency, we have 3 perspectives. It's like static, dynamic and radical. Static transparency is like just telling one way. Means the SHG or the member, he just tells what he wants to tell. You cannot question them. You cannot question them or get any feedback from them. He just tells. So it's like flow on this function. Information flows from SHG to S. Means SHG to stakeholders. And stakeholders to SHG doesn't happen. They cannot ask any questions and get any feedback. But dynamic transparency is like bidirectional flow. You can ask questions. You can ask any question and you can get whatever information you wanted to have. And radical transparency is like a level higher than dynamic transparency. It's not just asking question and getting, but it's like streaming, because there are too many SHGs. It's like 36 lakhs 70,000 SHGs are there. It is too much information, so it's like streaming of information. And then we have degrees of transparency. 3 degrees. Opaque is like, it's self-evident, we don't have to explain. No information is seen. And translucent is like partial disclosure of information. Clear is like everything is visible. And then we have 6 dimensions of transparency. First one is being transparent about the responsibilities. Second one is being transparent about the interdependencies, means recognizing them. Before we get into some activity, before we get into some task and all, we'll have a good, clear understanding regarding responsibilities and interdependencies. I just grouped them because they later fit into that stage. So we can stratify these dimensions of transparency by dimensions of time. So if we make it, they get classified into 3 dimensions of time: pre-activity, per-activity, and post-activity. Means before we begin the activity, before we begin the task, we'll get familiar with these 2 responsibilities and interdependencies, and this is during the activity. During the activity, what is the status? Almost here. And this is post-activity, after the activity is done. So interestingly, what happens is that the degree, we can again stratify the degrees of transparency by dimensions of time. So it's like dimensions into time and it's degrees into time. And here it gets even interesting. So it's like degrees of transparency, they can be stratified by dimensions of time. Here, this is dimension of time, and again, the dimensions of transparency also. So that way, it gets. Now during activity, if we have reached the activity phase, then we have reached the translucent phase. Means translucent degree. They have moved. I think I made in a different system, so it's like they are getting jumbled. And then finally we have directions of transparency. Still now we have seen degree, dimensions, and now this is direction. So transparency is like upward. Next slide. Upward transparency is like subordinate is transparent to superior. Superior means the person on the top, he will be able to see what all is happening with the subordinate. They are all self-evident. Downwards is like superior is transparent to subordinate. Inwards, it describes what outsiders can see in us, and outwards is the ability we are able to observe in peers and competitors, everyone. So that way, if we have measured all these things, all the perspectives, degrees, dimensions and directions, if we have maintained transparency in all these things, I think it is to the most part transparency. We can say we have achieved transparency. I think as per this work group environment, this should be enough, but it could be different for other environments. So I think this concludes my work. Thank you very much. And finally, I just want to take 1 minute for thanking ICDCIT for giving me this opportunity. This is the third ICDCIT I am attending, and again I thank my supervisor, Professor Rishikesh Mahanti. He is the best teacher I have seen all my life, and I think he's the best thing that occurred in my life. So I just want to thank. Okay, thank you very much. No, we'll design a system in such a way that all these perspectives are maintained, all these things. No, it's like maybe this presenter, you can put a question like, for how much you bought this presenter? And I will release like, I bought this for 1 lakh. No, so everybody knows this costs of 1,000, and I'm just... Yes.